Okay, this is possibly this is really the last series of videos I'm doing for English 373, the Shakespeare class. This is kind of the end. There's going to be another. This will be like a nice goodbye conclusion video thing that'll be short, but this is like the last series of videos doing any like the actual instruction. Um, in Shakespeare words and stuff. So this is us ending the final sort of Shakespeare text that we're gonna look at in this class. So okay. So I mentioned that The Phoenix and the Turtle is a poem by Shakespeare that showed up in a Batman comic book, and I showed you guys briefly the Batman comic book, and then we went over the poem. The poem has three sections. The first section it's a funeral for birds. These two birds that were madly in love with each other, the phoenix and the turtle dove. They call it a turtle, but don't picture the lizard with the hard shell. Picture the turtle dove. Turtle dove is a regular bird that exists. You can go look at it. The phoenix is not a bird you can see because it's a mythological bird. It's a sort of bird of flame and fire that sort of burns itself up in its own flames. Um, and the phoenix and the turtle were madly in love, and it seemed like they burned up together. Um, and we are now at their bird funeral. The poem is divided into three sections. The first section is basically listing off which birds are allowed to come to the funeral and what they're allowed to do when they get there. And which birds are not allowed to be at the funeral because they're bad fucking luck, like owls and hawks and vultures. Um, but some birds have jobs to do. So like one of the birds has a loud makes a loud sound, and that's going to be the sort of trumpet to tell everybody to show up and where to go. And then there's another bird who's going to be like the priest because it's all in white and it sort of knows death music and this kind of thing. Okay, so then the second part of the poem looks at sort of the paradox of love. The complicatedness of it. That it basically says the same thing over and over again in different ways, which is the birds are there's two birds, the phoenix and the turtle dove. But the two birds sort of are soulmates. They share one soul. So they're two birds, but they're also kind of one bird in a way because they're so connected. And so there's over and over again, there's different ways of saying this, right? That somehow they're apart. When they're apart, they're somehow also together. Um, that there's two natures, but they're in one body, and there's lots of different ways of saying this, but they mention a lot of the paradox of it. Um, Love in twain had the essence but in one, right? So they loved. They were two things, birds that were in love, but their essence. They have one essence, one soul. They're two distinct creatures, but they have no division. Normally, when something's distinct, it means they're divided. But here, there's no division because they're also one. Number there in love was slain. It's like numbers don't matter anymore. They don't make any sense anymore because somehow two equals one in love. Hearts remote, yet not asunder. So somehow their hearts are far away from each other, but also together because they share one heart. Distance and no space was seen. When they're far away, they're not far away because they're always, I don't know, in each other's thoughts or fundamentally together. Each belonged to the other. The self was not the same. So one bird should equal one bird, but in this case, the phoenix's self should be the phoenix. But in this case, they're so in love that the phoenix self is the turtle dove. The self is not the same. Single natures, double name, neither two nor one was called. So they have a single nature, but they have two names, the phoenix and the turtle. Um, they have the two names. There's sorry, I lost my place. I got a text message and it distracted me. Single nature's double name, neither two nor one was called. So they're a single nature because they share a soul, but they're a double name because there's the phoenix and the turtle. But they're not two or one. They're somehow neither. And the whole like reason, logic, mathematics can't make sense of this. And so reason, the sort of god of logic, kind of gives up because things that are divided are somehow put together again. And you can't divide and put together at the same time in logic. You got to do one or the other. Those are opposite things. But in love, opposites come together. To themselves, yet either neither, simple were so well compounded that there's two things, but when you combine them, they make something simple, meaning only has one ingredient, which is crazy because it should, if you combine two things, it should at least have two ingredients, but it doesn't. It only has one soul. And then the God of logic or reason says, how true a twain seemeth this concordant one, meaning how true these two things, they're in such concord, they're so connected, they're one. And then sort of the God of reason says, love has reason, reason none, if what parts can so remain. So love has reason, reason none, if what parts can so remain. So if these birds can go away from each other, but somehow still remain with each other because they're always in each other's hearts, then love has reason. Love makes sense. Reason none. Normal logic does not make sense anymore. Um, and so that's the kind of paradox of it. Um, so the and then the God of reason um, has more to say on this. So whereupon it made this threne to the phoenix and the dove, co-supremes and stars of love, as chorus to their tragic scene. So the God of reason has some things the God of logic has some things he would like to say. It's, by the way, I keep saying God. It's not really a God. That's just the way I put it. It's the personification of logic. If logic, so it's not a God. It's more like death is an idea. But when you imagine death, you picture the guy in the cloak with the scythe. Reason, logic is an idea, but in this poem, logic is presented as a person who has shit to say. So um, in this poem, oh boy, okay, getting a lot of text messages here. So in this poem, Reason is so blown away by this. He thinks it's so crazy because Reason's essentially giving up here. Love has reason, reason none, if what parts can so remain. So like reason is supposed to have reason. Reason is supposed to make sense. Logic is supposed to make sense. But here love has a different kind of logic is love. So that logic personified doesn't make any sense. So it's giving up. Um, and because it's giving up, it makes a little speech about giving up. Whereupon it made this threne. A threne is a song about death. Threnody is a song about death. Threnos here, song about death. Um, so whereupon it made this threne, it's going to sing like a death song about the phoenix and the turtle dove. Whereupon it made this threne. Actually, and by the way, I don't remember this exactly, but aren't there like invisible horses in Harry Potter that have some kind of funny name like Threnos or anyway, but only people who have been close to death can see them. I don't remember. Anyway, I think that's in there. So reason personified kind of gives up. Whereupon it made this threne. It's going to sing a death song to the phoenix and the dove because it's essentially saying, "Look, you guys won." The middle part of this poem is trying to make logical sense out of the fact that being in love means somehow you're two, but you're also one. And that's illogical. Two doesn't equal one. And so the sort of reason personified gives up and says, you know what, you guys win. Obviously, if you can be two and one at the same time, then nothing I do makes any sense. I give up. I'm going to sing this love song about you guys. And he calls the turtle and the dove, he calls the phoenix and the turtle dove co-supremes and stars of love as chorus to their tragic scene. Now, this is an interesting line here because tragic scene, it's like a play, and the chorus are the characters in the play that comment on the action for the audience. So it's worth pointing out that notice Shakespeare, by the way, he calls them stars of love. Romeo and Juliet are star-crossed lovers, doomed also like the phoenix and the turtle. And then reason is going to be he's going to step down, and instead of being logic, it's now going to be a chorus to this tragic scene. It's essentially going to comment on the action of this play, and the play is the funeral for the birds. And so the final part of the poem is called a threnos. That is a sort of death song. There's a famous song, you can look it up. It's one of the most disturbing things you'll ever hear. It's called Threnody for Hiroshima, and it's just one of the craziest pieces of music ever written. But the word Threnody is a death song because Hiroshima is where a lot of people died in the nuclear bomb. So threnos is a death song. Threne is another way of saying that. Threnody, threne, threnos. They're all related to death. Actually, I bet if you looked it up, Thanos is related to that too, but I'd have to check it out. Thanatos, as Freud says. But Thanos is the Marvel villain. So the poem ends with logic commenting on these birds like they're characters in a play and singing a song about how special they are because they don't make logical sense, but now logic, reason, has just given up and it's doing its own thing. So we'll cover that in the next video.